Hello YouTube, Sidekick here, and I am in a Mirage 2000C, which the astute amongst you may have already figured out. Now this may come as a little bit of a surprise to some of you who are familiar with this channel. It's a little bit out of character, since the words Iron Bomber may not leap to mind when you think of the Mirage, and this is, after all, a channel about iron bombing. But, and that's why I haven't spent a lot of time on the Mirage before, but I was encouraged lately to take a look by a number of people, and, when thinking about it, the Mirage 2000C is actually a contemporary of the A-10 and the Harrier, which are both what I consider to be in the last of the generation of real iron bombers. Its air-to-ground weapons suite contains mostly unguided weapons, and it turns out that it's actually pretty effective at delivering them, to be fair. And to be fair, it certainly can't be classed as a bomb truck, but it can bring some pretty surgically applied pain. So, let's take a look at the Mirage 2000C. To understand a bit about the Mirage, you have to understand that it's French, no? In sort of the same ways you need to understand that the Viggen is Swedish. In some ways, this effect is kind of the flip side of the coin from Sweden and the Viggen. I mean, both aircrafts are products of an aerospace industry that has, compared to the competitors in the United States, a pretty limited domestic market. Saab's reaction in Sweden, at least in the 1960s, was to develop specialized aircraft that were based on unique and innovative aerodynamic designs and which were tailor-made to solve Sweden's very particular needs. You can learn more about that in my videos about the Viggen. The French industry has always taken, in essence, the opposite view of the problem. Knowing that the French market is dedicated enough to pay for the development of a new aircraft, but not large enough to make the business really profitable, the French industrial base has for a long time worked on the understanding that the French government will guarantee them the work so long as they build products that the French armed forces need, but in return, French companies will design products that are also designed for the export market, especially the export market in less well-developed economies. And in return, the French government will work very hard to help sell those products in those markets. When you understand those facts of life, you'll understand the Mirage 2000, and I'll explain a bit more in a minute. The Mirage 2000, built by Dassault, is what is commonly referred to as a fourth-generation fighter, meaning that it was conceived and designed in the 1970s and brought into service in the 1980s. It also generally means that its aerodynamic design benefits from the experimentation that was done in the late 1960s to find ways of combining low-speed handling with supersonic performance, and also that it was expected to actually be built around some fairly sophisticated avionics, including a very capable radar. The Mirage had been the Dassault fighter brand since the 1950s, when they'd produced the Mirage 3, which was one of the most successful second-generation fighters based on a tailless delta wing design. The tailless delta design was very much a product of early research into supersonic flight. It has a lot of advantages for an aircraft that is designed to perform at high speeds. The delta design tends to be lighter and simpler than a simple swept wing for a variety of reasons we don't need to go into here. Also, for a variety of complicated aerodynamic reasons, it tends to be efficient, meaning it generates a lot of lift for relatively little drag, at high transonic and supersonic speeds, and critically, it tends to be well-behaved during the transition from one to the other, something that the early designers of supersonic aircraft definitely found was not always the case. The Mirage 3, therefore, had proven to be small, light, and relatively simple to make, while also providing performance the likes of which had frankly never been seen, and which frankly wasn't available outside the United States or the Soviet Union, which made it a massive export success. Now, for all its advantages, though, the delta wing design has its disadvantages, the principal one being that at low speeds and low altitudes, efficiency decreased dramatically, so that while it made an excellent high-altitude, high-speed interceptor, it was less well-suited to a multi-role design that performed ground attack as well as mixing it up at lower altitudes and lower speeds. So the successor to the Mirage 3, the F-1, had returned to a more traditional design, which was the result of a bunch of experimentation going on at Dassault and elsewhere, on more sophisticated aerodynamic solutions, including variable geometry wings. Dassault had eventually concluded, though, that the variable geometry solution meant an aircraft that was too large, too complicated, and yes, too expensive, to fit with its model of designing for French requirements and export market demands. So the F1 had featured a more standard swept wing design rather than the delta or the variable wing design that other designers were experimenting with, and which of course showed up in the F14 and the F111 and the MiG-23. But the F1 went on to be a very successful design, but not one that really extended the performance envelope the way the Mirage 3 had. So when it came time to design the next generation of French fighter, and the French Air Force made it clear that it wanted a fighter whose principal mission was that of high-speed interceptor, Dassault returned to the Delta design. But the new design was not your father's Delta wing, as the saying goes. The changes were mostly subtle, to the extent of being mostly invisible to those of us without advanced degrees in aeronautical engineering. They included some very subtle tinkering with the shape of the wing near the tips and also leading-edge slats. Perhaps the most important aspect was, though, that the design implemented fly-by-wire. And this was important because it relieved the pilot of needing to sense which flight regime the aircraft was in and change his style of flying in response. Instead, the computer did that for him, allowing the plane to be flown much closer to the edge of its performance envelope, thus getting a lot more out of the Delta design at low speeds than had been true in the Mirage 3. At the same time, the basic Delta design retained its lightweight, high strength, and simplicity, meaning that it would once again be an excellent candidate for the export market. It was also designed to be at once both a vehicle for selling French air-to-air missiles, since it was designed specifically to carry those, as well as being compatible with more widely available U.S. iron bombs and rockets. In the end, the Mirage 2000C was also a very successful design, serving in the French L'Armée de l'Air, but also being sold widely on the export market. It provided high-altitude performance that exceeded third-generation fighters like the F-4 Phantom, the F-1, or the MiG-23, and it was, and is, competitive with early fourth-generation fighters like the F-16 and the original F/A-18A. The design itself, and particularly the C model, which we have in DCS, is definitely designed for air-to-air combat. In particular, being designed around the very capable radar, and including a set of both beyond visual range and close-range missiles, as well as a particularly devastating pair of 30mm cannon. But none of that is what we're going to talk about today. Today, we're going out to the bombing range to drop some good old-fashioned unguided munitions. Now, it must be said that the C model that we have in DCS is not the ultimate Mirage 2000 strike fighter. That would be the two-seater D model, which is sort of analogous to the F-15 Strike Eagle in that it supports a lot more precision-guided munitions. The C model, though, is very much restricted to pretty much standard unguided munitions, including 2.75-inch rockets, slick bombs of the 500-pound or 250-kilogram variety, as well as high-drag bombs, again the 500-pound variety, and cluster bomb units. Now, the C model also supports early versions of precision-guided munitions in that it does carry laser-guided bombs, but it is not capable of designating its own targets. It also sports a fairly functional HUD, with all the bombing aids that one has come to expect from a plane that came into service in the 1980s. And speaking of HUD, before we go to the range, let's talk a little bit about computer bombing aids. Talked about this topic before, but given the conversations I periodically have on Discord and other places, it seems to bear repeating. So, there are two forms of bombing aid. The first is CCIP, Continuously Computed Impact Point. This predicts where your ordnance is going to fall, and it shows the pilot that expected impact point on the HUD, allowing you to select when to drop the bombs. It has the advantage of being very direct and very simple, but it does require that you keep the target in sight the whole time, which basically means dive bombing at the target. It also means that accuracy is determined by the pilot's ability to choose the release point accurately, even when that point is moving across the ground quickly and when there may be lots of distractions in the form of rapidly moving pieces of metal with your name on them. The second form of computer aid is CCRP, Continuously Computed Release Point. With CCRP, the pilot designates the target and then flies toward it, allowing the computer to select the release point. Now, this has the advantage that the pilot doesn't need to keep the target in sight. It allows the pilot to pull up into level flight or even toss the bombs from a distance. But it has the disadvantage that the release point must be flown to accurately, and that actually can be a challenge. However, you need to note that while CCRP supports level bombing delivery, it does not require it. CCRP is not a level bombing mode. You can, in fact, dive bomb with CCRP just like CCIP. In fact, one of the earliest bombing computers in DCS, the one in the A4, uses CCRP and is used in dive bombing mode all the time. So, just remember, you can dive bomb using CCRP, but you don't have to, and we'll take a look at that out on the range. All right, so we're taxiing forward out on the range. Just a few things that we set up before we started taxiing. We have turned our radar on and set it to Marche so that it's running and we're able to use it for radar altimetry. We've also checked the armaments control panel to make sure that we have both bombs and rockets displaying. We have set the release mode to Total rather than Shack par Shack, so we will drop all the rockets or fire all the rockets or drop all the bombs at once rather than dropping them in sequences. And I think other than that, we're pretty much ready to go. As I said, we won't really be making much use of the radar or any of the air-to-air capabilities, which is really what a lot of the avionics in the cockpit of the Mirage is built around, because that's what it was built to do. But as you can see, it's a nice, clean setup. Very representative, I think, of what I would think of in a fourth-generation fighter. We have the classic analog flight instruments upper left. Below that we have the armaments control panel, radar screen in the middle, engines controls on the right, and then obviously the HUD controls in top center. Okay, here we go getting lined up. I already am enjoying the Mirage HUD because the big box in the square in the middle of the screen actually tells you whether or not you are speeding up or slowing down when you're taxiing, which frankly is invaluable, at least for me. Right, final checks to make sure that we are ready to go. Let's spool up the engine, put it in afterburner, and off we go. The Mirage is pretty nimble, gets down the runway pretty quick. You do have to lift the nose a little bit before she finally comes unstuck. You don't want to pull too far back. Got to keep that T below the horizon line or you will strike the tail before you take off. But now we're up, we don't have to worry about that. And now this is where the feature of the HUD that I really appreciate in the Mirage comes in. As you can see, I'm just letting speed build up in afterburner. But then I'm going to, when I take the afterburner off, you're going to see the chevrons on the right and left side of the screen come down the screen, and those are the acceleration chevrons. It turns out that all I have to do is actually keep my flight path vector right between the middle of them, and that actually gives me my maximum sustained rate of climb at this airspeed, which is frankly amazing. I wish every jet I flew had the ability for me to determine that. I really enjoy these acceleration chevrons on the Mirage HUD. Same thing, it's just as easy when we turn. We can just pull back until we get the chevrons even, or if we want to let the speed build like I'm doing, we just keep the flight path vector ever so slightly below the chevrons and gradually come out of the turn at a slightly higher speed than we went in. So I find the Mirage HUD probably my favorite of all the ones that I've flown, in terms of having the right information in the right place with just the right amount of declutter. I have really enjoyed flying the Mirage HUD for sure. And those acceleration chevrons are the things that really get it for me. Okay, so now we're checking. We're selecting our rockets. We're checking to make sure that we are in total mode and that we are going to launch them all at the same time. And we have turned the master arm on. And another lovely thing in the Mirage cockpit is when you do that, you see the little red tab on the trigger switch so you can tell that you are actually armed. Isn't that a fantastic innovation for everyone who has ever rolled into a dive, especially like in the A4, and forgotten that the master arm was still off? Okay, so we're just going to sort ourselves out, come in a fairly shallow dive to use the rockets. It's a very simple HUD for the rockets and also very effective. We're just going to We have mapped a button on the HOTAS to put the HUD in effectively air-to-ground mode, and because we've selected the rockets, we get the rocket aiming mode, just a big circle, and we're going to play it on the target, and when the circle starts to unwind from the top left, it's going to unwind in a counterclockwise direction. We're going to know we're in range, and we'll be cleared to fire the rockets. We just have to fire them before it unwinds all the way. So we're just going to hold it on the middle there, hold it in the middle, and there we go. We're just in range, fire the rockets, and we cover the target. Nice, clean launch. Couldn't be simpler. We'll take a look at our results here when we get the target information tracking script up. And look at this, we can pull up and basically climb out at a constant speed, or climb out a little higher and lose a little bit of that speed. Those chevrons just make this so easy to fly the jet the way you want to. And looking at the results, they're not so much interested in the accuracy because it is a sort of a grouping, but we did launch from more than 3,000 feet, more than 2 kilometers away, with 2.75-inch rockets. That's pretty good accuracy from that range, and in fact, you won't do as well in the A-10. I'm not sure about the Harrier, but the A-10, I think you'd be hard-pressed to get that kind of accuracy at that kind of range, even with the 2.75. So that's a pretty good result. So let's just go actually, we'll stay with the rockets. As a reminder, we're on unlimited ammo, so we've refilled the rocket pods. We're going to go around to the far side of the range, and we're going to take a look at, there's a target, there's a group, I think there's 4 M113s over there. Let's just find out if these rockets are good enough to actually take out a vehicle. If we were to attack a group of vehicles with the rockets, we're just going to bend ourselves around. Once again, this is so easy to fly the Mirage and decide if we're going a little fast, which we are. We can start dropping speed. Just makes your whole roll in and approach that much easier to fly accuracy than a lot of the older jets. The other thing that's really good about the Mirage is the visibility down the sides and over the nose. So you don't necessarily have to be rolling in quite so dramatically, because you can bring the target almost right in underneath you and still keep eyes on it before you roll in. All of which makes it a lot easier. You know, the essence of iron bombing is the approach and the roll in, and the Mirage just gives you some tools that make that a lot easier. So you can see nice easy roll in. We put the lift vector on the target, and we move our sight right up to the target. There's a group of 4 little specks there. We're just going to try and get on them, and then we are just going to wait until we get inside minimum range. There, keep it on them, and fire. And we got an M113 for our trouble. Now the broken little sort of bracket that was coming up from the bottom is the minimum altitude cue. And we are going to have cause to discuss that a little bit more as we go through the practice today. So as that bracket comes up the screen, when it gets to the flight path vector, it's going to turn into a big X, and it's going to basically tell you that you should not be launching weapons below this altitude. The only issue I have with it is that it's picking altitudes that are way higher than I think they need to be. I don't know if that's just an extra safety factor, but as you'll see as we go through here, we're probably going to violate that minimum altitude release cue at least a couple of times, and in practice I do it all the time and have not yet had anything bad happen to the jet. So I'm not sure what's happening there, and it doesn't seem to be possible to calibrate it. Okay, we're switching over to bombs. I'm going to switch to 2, even though that's all of the bombs we have, just to be sure. And we're going to go around and take a look at bombing just the main target again, but this time we're going to go in with bombs. And we're going to use the kind of by-the-book approach, and by the book I mean the one that's recommended in Chuck's guide and other documentation. So we're going to back up here somewhere around 8,000–9,000 feet. We're going to dive in at a reasonably shallow angle. This will be a CCRP bombing run. We will get a pipper. We will put the pipper over the target, designate the target using a button. The Mirage uses a button on the throttle, so I'm using a button on my throttle. You can set it up any way you want to. And then once we see the pre-release cue, we will press the trigger, and the bombing computer will actually release the bombs on time to hit the target. Still pulling back the speed a little bit, don't want to be going too fast. Okay, we're now in air-to-ground mode. That diamond is our pipper. Now, of course, the accuracy of our drop is limited by our ability to put that accurately on the target and designate the target. We want to try and carefully get it in the middle of the target. Designate and start pulling up. Now you can see our release cue, the flat line coming up. The wings on either side of the diamond tell us which direction to fly the aircraft to stay flying straight toward the target. And then as it goes by, I did not hear the bombs go. Haha! Okay, point number one. With the Mirage, you do have to make sure that you fuse your bombs. The bombs were set to inert, and that is why they did not drop. Or if they did drop, I won't see any effect of them anyways. They won't even come up on the target information tracking script. So, we're going to have to go do that again. So we'll pull out and around here and go back and have another shot at that. Okay, so coming around here again, around a little over 9,000 feet, slowing down a little bit, well back from the target, and we'll try this again. So pull around, and then we'll go to air-ground mode, and again, try and put the pipper right over the target before we designate, and then it's a matter of flying basically straight toward the target, and we're going to use the little wing symbols that show up to help us do that. So as I said, we're going to use the good visibility out of the Mirage here to keep flying mostly towards the target, so we're not going to have to roll in that dramatically. We see the target just off to the left and below the nose there. This looks like a good range. So we're going to roll in. Again, we're just going to put the lift vector on the target. We're going to roll it out, try and get the pipper over the target, and then we're going to designate right about there. We immediately get the cue coming up, so we'll pull up a little bit. It's coming up, and there go the bombs. And just before we got to the minimum altitude cue. And so we'll wait and see what the target information tracking script has to say. Can't see back there far enough to see. It looks like it was a pretty good drop. Let's see what the script has to say. Okay, those look like pretty good results. 16-meter accuracy. We dropped at about 3,000 feet and a couple of clicks back from the target. Okay, as you can see, that was pretty straightforward. And we did not... It was really kind of cross... It wasn't a full-level bombing attack, but neither was it really a deep dive at the target. Nice shallow dive, easy to pick up the target. And I think worked pretty well. So let's take a look at another way of doing that. Maybe we'll actually try and bomb even a little bit more level, maybe even with a little bit, see if we can get a little bit of toss on the bombs this time and drop them from even farther back and see how that affects our accuracy. As you can see, the real trick is flying level enough as you're flying towards the target, because you'll see those wings appear, and as they roll, you have to stay rolled with them to keep the plane aimed at the target. And the problem is, of course, that you get into a little bit of pilot-induced oscillation as you do that and start going back and forth, and it's not too long before you lose the accuracy if you're not careful. And that is the problem that you often have with these kind of CCRP level bombing modes, which is why it doesn't enjoy a great reputation often amongst sim pilots, at least. Okay, so once again, we're taking advantage of the fact that we can keep the target off the nodes and still see it from a ways back. As you can see, we're even lower down this time. Dive angle's just a little bit more than 10 degrees. I'm going to pull the pipper up to the target. And once I pickle it, now I'm going to pull up pretty aggressively, and you can see I'm fighting, keeping the wings level as I pull up, pulling up even more, pulling up even more, pulling up even more. Here comes the release cue, so now I'm squeezing the trigger and still trying to keep it level, and bomb's gone. So it was not really a toss bombing, but more like a level bombing around that time. Oops, just got to set the fuel bingo down here. Give me a sec. That's the alarm that's telling me that I am below my bingo fuel state. There it is. So let's see what target information tracking script had to say about that one. We have no idea how we did there. We'll just take a look as soon as the script gets us an answer. Yep, there we go. You can see the accuracy not very good, although we did have, we dropped from a decent altitude, 4,600 feet, and we also dropped pretty far back from the target, so lots of standoff. So it was a safe drop, but not an accurate one. And this is kind of the knock, I think, that CCRP often gets, is people try to use it in that level bombing mode, and that's the kind of results they get, which is not really very accurate. So, but I just want to demonstrate for you that you can actually use the CCRP mode in a true dive bombing mode, and this time we're really cozying up close to the target. And we're back in air-to-ground mode, and this time we're going to do a much more aggressive roll-in, a little bit inverted. And we're really just going to try and get that pipper on the target as quickly as we can. And as soon as we pickle, we're going to be on the trigger, because we're going to get that line. And you can see we got the minimum release cue telling us not to release, but it'll let us anyways. And now we get down quite a bit lower as we come over the target, but let's see how much better we do on the target information tracking script when we take a look at how well they dropped. Just that glance backwards looked like it was pretty good. So you can see there's no problem at all using the CCRP as a true dive bombing release mode. There's no reason why you have to use it in level flight. Let's see how we did. Well, now, it's pretty hard to do much better than that. 5-meter accuracy from 4,000 feet. That's pretty much putting it in the pickle barrel. So, anyways, that's 3 ways of using CCRP mode in the Mirage. As you can see, there is a trade-off between accuracy and standoff, but it is definitely true that you can use CCRP in dive bombing mode and get pretty accurate results. So, I'm going to stay out here on the range, get a little bit more practice in my Mirage 2K. Hope the video was helpful. For now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.